That sucks. Okay, well, I'm learning how to use it this time. Hopefully, I'll know better next time, right? But it sounds like that's something you're talking about is internalized racism, right? Not where black people are against white people, but rather where black people are against their own, right? Right? So internalized racism, or what others could say is anti-blackness for black people, right? It's something internal that comes out of racism, right? Mm-hmm. So it sounds like when you're thinking of racism, you're thinking that racism is um, saying something bad about a person of another race. Uh huh. Yes. Okay. So distrust against other black people, right? Which again is a part of internalized racism. Okay, but we'll talk about it. Yes. Uh-huh.
Maligo ka na muna bago tayo maligo. Ang manood. Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like, first of all, immigration is a racist issue, right? And so it sounds like we can have some feelings about immigration of other groups, right? And so you feel like that's racism, okay? And also reactions to racism, being upset at the oppressor, in reaction to being oppressed. Okay, all right, yes. Mm-hmm.
on the same type of level. I mean, I know we don't want to, but be on the same level as white people have been all these years.
Okay, okay. So there's someone who's saying, tell me your name? Cameron is saying we can't be racist,
but we can be prejudiced. So what would we need to know to answer this question? This question, can black people be racist? What will we need to know? What is racism, right? And how are we going to get that information?
Google it.
That's what most people do. They Google it, right? And so if you Google it, you get your definition from Google. Let's say you get it from Webster's, right? Because you can Google Webster. Does Webster know anything about racism? Like, honestly, who the fuck is Webster? Right? Like, so then if we can't necessarily trust Google or Webster, what would we need to know to define racism?
History.
Good. So you'd have to know history. Uh-huh. Let me see.
Now, according to when you say Google, according to what you're saying, it's pretty much like what we said, it's only what they have heard from studies. They go
from studies? Are they?
I think like what the dictionary,
okay.
Studies, because pretty much what we are seeing here. It says racist, a person who shows or feels discrimination or prejudice against people or other races, or who believes that a particular race is superior to another. And they have the synonyms as racial bigot, racialist, and xenophobic, and chauvinist.
Okay.
So whose definition is that?
That's the question, right?
Yeah.
Does Google cite its sources?
Yeah.
It does?
No, I'm just saying, no, they didn't cite sources where this come from. It just said this is a dictionary.
Okay. Yeah, so Google's not citing sources at this point and telling us where Google came up with that definition. So can we just trust somebody who just comes up with a definition? No. Okay, let me take one more person.
So, in my experience, racism to me seems like it had to do with money and power. At one time, a black man would be killed if he was caught reading. There were only certain parts of the Bible that were read and the words were changed. It was all about not wanting to keep the land and the power and the food and everything else. And man, I was in the military. I was in the Marine Corps for 8 years. My father was a Pearl Harbor survivor. My father had friends that fought in World War II, came home and were lynched. Okay? We fought for this country under segregation. We weren't allowed to play baseball until 1940 something. We weren't allowed to vote until 1965. I mean, and it's over and over. And it's all about being a threat. It's all about money and power.
Okay. So what I'm getting from that is when answering that question, money and power has to be taken into consideration. Consideration. I guess I just wanted to add that, a little extra Z. You know what I'm saying? Consideration when we're thinking about our definition of racism, right? That's what I'm getting. Okay, so let's go back here. Here it is. So, looks like we also have to understand how power, and since we live in a capitalist system, we also have to understand how capitalism works, right? Or how money works. And by the way, these are not interchangeable. I am putting that there, but they're not interchangeable. You can have money in a system that's not capitalist. Okay. What else would we need to know to answer that question? Can black people be racist? Something that kind of comes out of history that's really important to understand is how race and racism works, right?
Because otherwise, I mean, how would we define it? We have to know how it works in real life rather than just have some big word that encompasses everything. We would want to understand for a system that's been over, what, 500 years old? We'd want to know how it works in order to define it, right? What about in terms of history, where it originated and why? Right? What was it set out to do? Right? Well, we'll see. Good. And then anything else you think that we need to know in order to answer this question, can black people be racist? Right? What else do we need to know?
About education is about
How it relates to education, absolutely.
taught, not taught,
Uh-huh. So maybe systems of racism?
and the ignorance of individuals who say things and they don't know what words mean. Right?
Okay.
I'm waking up. Come on.
Okay. Okay, good. We'd also have to know about race itself, right? Right? We need to know, I mean, we're looking at this word, racism. We need to know the history of race itself. Do you have your hand up? And I didn't call you? Yeah. Oh, okay, sorry. Yes.
What about inferiority?
Okay, yes. So one of the things we need to understand is something that has to do with inferiority is hierarchy. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Oh, did I tell you I can't spell? So whatever, if it bothers you, just let me know. If it don't bother you, fuck it. As far as I'm concerned. Because it ain't our language anyway, really, right? We should be knowing some African language, right? So, yeah, I did try to correct that. But I used to do HEI, it just depends on the day. What'd you say? Okay, so it sounds like we need to understand black people, right? What is a black person? Where did that term come from?
What's the moral nature?
Well, I mean, he's saying the moral nature. We have to understand race to understand something about that. But I think what I'm taking from it is that we need to understand what black is, right? Or even we need to understand how black people are made up. We'll get there. Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's an important thing to understand. I can't help I'm black, but what does blackness mean in the world? Right? That's an important thing to understand here. We'll get there. But one thing to understand is this. Oh, sorry. This thing is, what is a black person is important because we have to know what we're talking about here, right? Well, we're gonna get there, definitely. Mm-hmm. But right now, we're just trying to, whenever you answer a question, right? They teach us to just kind of willy-nilly answer questions, right? Well, can black people be racist? And the average person says no or yes, right? But do they know all of this? Like, how many of you who answered the question, and it's okay, how many of you that answered the question feel like they have a good understanding of these things? Okay? So an understanding of how race started, how it works, right? Right? How race started, how it works, where it originated from, and why. How did white people become white? How did black people become black? Right? What is blackness? And how does power, money, and capitalism play into it?
right? You'd have to know those things to answer the question fully, right?
Cause like you said, when you power, I know this like, cause I hear people all the time, this guy got niggas from power now, he's just eating bleeding that. You know what I'm saying? So, he does.
So in terms of that, like that keeps coming up is this kind of idea of internalized racism. But one of the things you'd have to understand is out of that hierarchy, what tends to happen when people are oppressed, right? That's another part of it. What tends to happen? What happens when people are oppressed? It doesn't have to be like that, right? So there's a lot of stuff we gotta learn, right? I'm gonna walk you through this. I'm gonna give you the short version. There's a whole class you could take on this, right? I teach a class, AFRAM 19, right? Which is racism in America. But I'm gonna walk you through this in a real quick way.